Start there with an introduction. Today's speaker, Susanne Hoepfl-Wellenhoffer, who was born in Austria and has been living and working in the US since 1986. Even before finding Theosophy and beginning to attend lectures in 2009, she has been following her own spiritual path, comparing religion, science, philosophy, and psychology for over 20 years. The biographical information that was provided in the invitation to today's seminar is available for you to review, so I won't go into those details again, beyond to say that she continues to serve in various roles in the Theosophical Society in America and creates courses for the online School of Theosophy. So on to the subject of today's webinar, Astrology as a Key to Self-Knowledge, a Theosophical Perspective. Having grown up with a father who was both a theosophist and an astrologer in his private life, I can attest to the power of astrology to guide and inform our choices and to shed light on the challenges, opportunities, and relationships we encounter as we progress through life. Most people have had exposure to sun sign astrology in the popular media, but that is astrology's superficial, commercialized aspect. While humans have observed the stars for guidance since prehistory, organized astrology as a divinatory practice goes back over 4,000 years to ancient Mesopotamia and subsequently China, India, and Mesoamerica. These ancient civilizations were enlightened in ways we may only begin to imagine. Astrology, according to Helena Blavatsky and other theosophists, is the oldest known science. True astrology encompasses both the exoteric, observable celestial mechanics shared with astronomy, and esoteric, occult influences on humanity, making it the mother of purely physical sciences that later divorced the spiritual dimension. Theosophy regards astrology not as mere superstition, but as a rigorous science built on observation, analogy, and the philosophical worldview expressed in the ancient Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. In addition to theosophical insights, Susanne's talk will introduce some of the basic principles of astrology, offering both newcomers and seasoned seekers a framework for seeing how the movements of the heavens mirror the inner path of the soul. So, Susanne, over to you. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. I love this. So let's go right into it. And there should be time at the end for some questions. So, as you mentioned, according to Helena Blavatsky, who was one of the co-founders of the Theosophical Society, as you all know, which was founded on November 17th, 1875, and other scientists, it is the oldest known science, and all other sciences appear to have been its children. It comes to us, as you also mentioned, out of prehistoric times and suggests the existence of a prehistoric civilization that was enlightened far beyond our own in some respects. So there are two quotes I wanted to share from Helena Blavatsky about what she said about astrology. So the first one is from Isis Unveiled. She said, "Astrology is a science as infallible as astronomy itself, with the condition, however, that its interpreters must be equally infallible, and it's this condition, sine qua non, so very difficult of realization, that has always proved a stumbling block to both. Astrology is to exact astronomy what psychology is to exact physiology. And in astrology and psychology, one has to step beyond the visible world of matter and enter into the domain of transcendent spirit." And this is, of course, a very true statement that she made. It's not only a science, but the interpreters have to be equally infallible. And that is a huge challenge. And there are astrologers who focus on the mundane astrology, esoteric, but there are astrologers who are more advanced. They also focus on karmic astrology. And I have been doing astrology for many years, and I know that that I still have to learn a lot, and I might not learn everything in this life, and it might take more lives. So I'm one of the Theosophists who has no doubt in reincarnation. And the second quote is from The Zodiac and Ourselves by Blavatsky. And she said, the zodiac was known in India and Egypt for incalculable ages. The knowledge of the sages and magi of these countries, with regard to the occult influence of the stars and heavenly bodies on our earth, was far greater than professional astronomy can ever hope to reach. Modern wisdom is satisfied with astronomical computations and prophecies based upon unerring mathematical laws. And ancient wisdom added to the cold shell of astronomy by vivifying element of its soul and spirit. And that's what you said in the introduction. You know, this is really a very old science. So, for me, at least, astrology is scientific in its mathematical calculations, in its consistency of interpretation, and in its direct correlation with the heavenly bodies. But at the same time, it is a spiritual art because it reveals the life plan of individuals. So this is with permission of Pablo Senda, the image. So I wanted to start with the solar logos and the seven rays. So everything in our solar system, matter, life, and consciousness, derives from a single source, the solar logos. That's what we believe in Theosophy, and that's what we teach. And as you see at the top, it's like this circle in white, like white light split by a prism. The logos differentiates into 7 fundamental rays. These are 7 types of cosmic energy, and each a mode of consciousness, energy, and substance. And at the head of each ray stands a lofty being. It's often called a planetary spirit or a minor logos. So to go deeper, each ray is not just an energy, but it is guided by a high cosmic intelligence. And the key concept is that while a specific ray may predominantly express itself through one planet, the life of all 7 rays flows through every planet, including Earth, and affects all beings. And this forms the basis for esoteric astrology. Now, as Jennifer said at the beginning, as above, so below. When we also look at the human beings, we all have a soul ray, right? But we are also influenced by our personality ray. And then those who study the rays a little bit deeper also know about the mental rays and the mental sub-rays and the astral rays of each person. So we are influenced by all rays. One of the things that is very important to remember that planets indicate effects. So in the Theosophical view, physical planets do not cause effects. They just indicate them. If we look at the clock does not cause the time, right? The clock only indicates the time. That's the best analogy. So planetary motions mark cycles of activity occurring on subtler dimensions or planes of the universe. So the linkage exists because human beings are connected with the cosmos and also connected to the energy that is emanated. But we have to remember that we still have a free will, right? We have a will. I mean, let's leave it out because there are often discussions how much free will we have. But because influences act through the substance of our vehicles, they can stimulate tendencies, but they do not negate the will. And if we are aware of that, it creates a choice. For example, my sun is in Gemini, and Gemini, the ruler of Gemini is Mercury. So, and my Mercury is also in Gemini, right? So I am very much affected by Mercury retrograde. I have to be very careful. It is amazing to me, in fact. So, but because I'm aware of that, I will not buy any electronics when it's Mercury retrograde, because I have made the experience that there will be a problem. For example, the last time I did that was, 10 years ago. I bought an iPhone, and a few weeks later, the camera didn't work. I had to get a new one. It's not a big deal, but it just told me, be careful. I also, with important emails, are very careful about sending them and reading them twice or making sure that they arrive. So because I know that, it helps me. And with self-knowledge and self-mastery, we can cooperate with these favorable tides and resist unhelpful impulses or simply wait for better currents. Sometimes it's a good time to be active, to take action, to do what we need to do. But sometimes it's better to be reflective, to wait, to step back. So with that, astrology becomes a tool for conscious living, and it's not a sentence of fate. So we learn that every human being has its own individually composed structure of forces made up of the same creative forces that radiate from the stars in the universe. So at the moment of birth, the structure of forces in the individual's own little zodiac wheel is identical with that of the forces in the great cosmic zodiacal wheel. As above, so below, as Jennifer said at the beginning. And she also pointed out that most of us know, or many of us at least know, our sun signs. But the sun sign is only the beginning of astrology, because astrology is as expansive as the heaven and as unique as we are. Because all 12 signs appear somewhere in our chart. And all those planets and signs influence us. It doesn't matter what our sun sign is. So basically, the energies dance together in many different ways, and they can make our life easier or create challenges. That depends on the aspects, and I will talk about that later. So based on the date, place, and time of our birth, the planets and signs in the houses of our birth chart create a metaphor for us. So the planets are the what of astrology. They represent various energies of a person, including one's mental and emotional nature, our desires, our vitality, soul, will, and consciousness, and subconsciousness, as well as people in one's life. Now, each planet is in a specific sign. There are 12 signs, right? And they tell us how do we express those planets? For example, as I mentioned, I have sun. My sun sign is in Gemini. Geminis love to communicate. There are other things I could add, but that's a main thing. So that's how I like to express my sun, right? And the houses are the where of astrology. And each house represents a specific arena of our life. and is the stage where the dramas of the planets unfold. My sun is in the 11th house. The 11th house has to do with group work. So I'm involved in many different groups. It has to do with friendships. I have very many friends and I have a very active social life. And I'm not talking about social media friends, right? It also has to do with service to humanity. So that's also important in my life. And because this is important and because I study astrology, I can see that that I seem to fulfill my soul's purpose. We don't have to go through all the signs and its rulers. And I'm happy for those who are interested to share the PDF of this PowerPoint. You just have to tell Marie, and I will be happy to share that. But on the left, you have the 12 signs. But each sign has a ruler. For example, Aries is ruled by Mars, or Taurus by Venus, and Gemini, as I said, by Mercury. And let's say in the old days, right, at the beginning, we had 7 original planets. At that point, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune have not been discovered yet, right? So each sign, some of the signs were ruled, some of the planets ruled 2 signs, and we still have 2. For example, Mercury rules Gemini as well as Virgo, and Venus rules Taurus as well as Libra. And so those who do a lot of research are sure that there will be 2 more planets discovered that, in the future. But by those, I mentioned that because somebody has asked me that a year ago. Well, we know from the ancient scientists and astrologers, they have written a lot about the planets and the signs and what's going on, and so we can trust that. What about Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune? Well, anybody who studies astrology and does a lot of research and finds books knows there have been astrologers focused on those 3 planets, and they have written a lot about it, and they have done a lot of charts, and by doing that they have come up with interpretations that make complete sense, especially for those who work with charts. And I always feel like astrology is like a language, right? English is my 3rd language. And when you learn a language, you have to really study, for example, my native language is German, but my mother was born in Croatia, and so I grew up bilingual. And, each language has rules about articles and about the nouns and the verbs and the irregular verbs and the structure and the syntax, etc., etc. And so I feel astrology is a language too, right? And it has symbols. And even for those who are not astrology and just like to read these little columns in the newspapers that have to do with transit, but they're too general that they have a real meaning, in my personal opinion. But each of the signs has a symbol. And of course, each of the planets also has a symbol. But here are the symbols from left to right. You have Aries, and then Taurus, and Gemini, and Cancer, and then Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and then Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces is the last one. As I mentioned before, so the houses are the where. And it just really, in the way I see it, is that there are certain things that in each incarnation we have to focus on. So there are certain houses, areas in our life we have to focus on. So the first three houses have to do with, they are the most personal one. They have to do with our personal identity. For example, the first one is about our appearance, about our body, first impressions and beginnings. It has to do with our identity. The second one is about money, essence, and we has some work. It has to also do, and that was people sometimes overlook, with our self-worth, right? Um, and the third house has to do with our mind, the way we think, the way we communicate, but also with early education, neighbors and siblings, right? The second, the houses 4 to 6, they have to do with how we establish ourselves, how we express ourselves. The fourth one has to do with home, roots, family, our emotions, emotional foundation, really, mothers, children, women. The fifth has to do, the way I say it is creation, procreation, and recreation. These are the three words that I associate with the fifth house because they have to do with our romance, love affairs, but our childlike spirit. And it very often has to do with the first child. And the sixth house has to do with two things that are very important: health, fitness, but also work habits and sense of usefulness. Then the seventh to the ninth house, they connect us to the outer world. They have to do with our social identity. So, whereas the first house has to do with our appearance, our body, first impressions, the seventh house has to do with relationships, with close relationships, marriage, for example, business partners, with contracts, with an interpersonal life. Now, the eighth house has to do with shared finances like inheritance, taxes, loans, but it also has to do with mystery, with sex, with intimacy. The ninth house has to do with philosophy, long distance travel, whereas the third house is short trips. The ninth house is with long distance travel, with higher education, whereas the third house is early education. It has to do with cross-cultural relations, with learning, with ethics. And then the 10th to the 12th house is where we make our mark, like how we express ourselves socially. The 10th house to do with career, with long-term goals, with our reputation, the public image, masculinity, men, fathers. But also, and this is something that can be a little bit tricky, was authority, with our own authority too. And so sometimes it has to do with the father, but it could sometimes be the mother, right? So nowadays things are a little bit different than in the old days. The 11th house has to do with our groups, friends, social awareness, and really humanitarianism, technology, hopes and wishes in the future. Now, this 12th house sometimes has a a challenging reputation. It has very often to do with our subconscious, with things that are hidden, limiting beliefs, with karma, but it also has to do with endings, healings, and closure. So, one of the things that we should never underestimate are the elements. So there are 4 elements: the fire, the water, air, and earth. And it tells us a lot about a person and what is emphasized in this in one particular life, right? Fire signs represent energy, passion. People who have a lot of planets in fire signs, they are known for their boldness. They are very enthusiastic. Now, the water represents emotions. And so people with, more planets in water signs, they can be very intuitive, empathetic, and emotional. They navigate life with a strong sense of empathy. There is an emotional depth. Now, air signs represent the intellect, communication, and they excel in social interactions and abstract thinking. Now, earth signs represent stability, practicality, connection to the tangible world, reflecting qualities of groundedness and reliability. And it really helps if we understand that. For example, if you look at what's behind me, you can see there are lots of books. There are books, this is our library, my husband's and my library, but we have books in other rooms too. I have a lot of I have a lot of fire and air in my chart, and that means for me it's important to read. It's important to do research. It's important to express myself, right? My husband and I are going to celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary this year, but he is all earth. Now I'm a little bit more air and fire. He's a lot of earth, right? Because he has his ascendant in the earth side, his sun, and also his moon. My husband needs to garden. He has an organic garden. He does weeding, like he doesn't use any fertile, weed killers or whatever. He pulls out the weeds. He loves to cook. He loves to work outside. So, and that is important to him. That is important to him as important to him as it is important to me to do the reading and the research. He also reads, but he reads at night, when he goes to bed for a little bit. So when we know that, we have a better understanding for the needs of others. Now, sometimes in a chart there is an element missing or sometimes it's underrepresented, but then it can be balanced somehow. But when it's completely missing, it can be a little bit of a challenge. So, for example, if somebody has no planets in earth signs, they are impractical because earth brings things to practicality. And again, if a loved one has missing an earth sign, and we understand that, then there is, in my opinion at least, this is now my personal opinion, more tolerance for that, more understanding, more compassion. Sometimes people have no planets in fire signs. They might lack energy. They might not be motivated. They might not be able to access the divine will. It can be very hard. There are people who have no planets in water signs. So then they don't understand their feelings, right? They may explain, they might intellectually be aware of what they feel, but they cannot sense it. And that can be very challenging. And then sometimes people have no air, so they might over-explain and might try to be over-intellectual. So this is just in case you want that PDF. So let's look first at the principles, right? So all air and fire signs are masculine, right? That means there's more, if you have a lot of fire and air, you are more active. And if you have, and all earth and water signs are feminine. That means usually people who have a lot of earth and water, they are more receptive, right? And then we'll go into more detail about this. There are certain modes, like modes are cardinal, fixed, mutable. And then, so you start, the Aries is the first one, it's a cardinal sign. Taurus is the second one, it's fixed. Gemini is the third, it's mutable. And then it goes around. And by the way, all planets go counterclockwise, right, when they move, except the nodes. We'll get into the nodes. They go clockwise. So, as I said, if you look at the chart, the signs of the zodiac can be divided into cardinal, fixed, and mutable. So it makes sense. The cardinal is the first group. It is made up of the signs that mark a change of season, right, in the calendar. That is why all of them have the quality of pioneers. They're called to start something, to launch into something new, to initiate. The houses of our chart ruled by the cardinal stars are the areas of our life in which we tend to start projects or try new things. So this is Aries in March when spring starts. This is Cancer. In that's Cancer is middle June. It starts in mid-June, around the 21st, depending on the year. That is when the summer starts, and Libra is when the fall starts, and Capricorn is when winter starts. It's mid-December. So it makes complete sense. Now, fixed signs is when the season, when the climate is a little bit more stabilized, right? And everything becomes more peaceful. So this is the analogy of the fixed signs. They are obstinate, they're stubborn and predictable. They're afraid of unexpected, or at least of stepping out of the pattern they have mentally predefined. They work with determination on the goals. They have set them for themselves, and when they look to the future, they do it with very clear ideas. They don't like anything that's unexpected. They don't like unexpected changes. The houses of the chart ruled by the fixed signs are those areas in the life where we will develop our willpower, but also in which will be more difficult to adapt. And one of the things, it all depends. We always have to look at the whole chart. But if somebody has the ascendant, a fixed sign, and also a lot of other fixed signs, they really, even if they want to change, they want to improve, and they want to grow, it's very hard for them. They really have to have a strong will to be able to do that. So those fixed signs are Taurus, which starts in mid-April, and then Leo, which starts in mid-July, and then Scorpio and Aquarius. So it goes with when the seasons are stable. And then we have the mutable signs, right? They have the instability that characterizes the period between two seasons. They're a little bit from here, a little bit from there. They have learned to adopt and sail in the direction of the wind. They're intelligent, they're adaptable. So the houses of your chart that's ruled by mutable signs are those areas of your life in which you will be able to be objective and analyze problems with intelligence and emotional distance. Also, they tend to find, those with a lot of mutable signs tend to find changes, novelties. They are, as mentioned before, more adaptable. But if you have too many mutable signs, that is not good either, because then everything becomes wishy-washy. So that's why one of the first things when you have an interpretation is how many mutable cardinal fixed signs do we have? Where do we have to find the balance? What do we have to work on, right? The mutable signs are Gemini. I'm a Gemini. However, my ascendant is Leo, which is fixed, and my moon is also in a fixed sign. So I have a balance with that. And then Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Another thing that we have to pay attention to is to understand the importance of divisions of the chart. So if you here on the left side, you see a zodiac, a wheel, and the first house is angular, the second is succedent, and then decadent. When you interpret, very often you look at the first, the fourth, and the seventh and the 10th house, because these are angular houses, and in the interpretation, very important, most important, because they signify action. They represent the cardinal qualities. So that's why they are considered most important, forceful, and they seem to, or let's say it's stronger. They have the most important, the greatest impact in our life. The succedent houses, the second, fifth, eighth, and 11th, they are ruled by the fixed signs, but they are stable, they are fixed, they have fixed qualities. They represent insights into the different areas of sustenance and growth. And the cadent houses, the third, sixth, ninth, and 12th, they are ruled by mutable signs, and they represent the realms where adaptability, learning, and change take the forefront, right? So another thing that's interesting, and I'm going to show a chart uh, very soon, is the hemispheres, right? So the Eastern Hemisphere, and when I show a chart, I will show that they are the first, second, third, and then the 10th, 11th, 12th house. So the whole eastern part of the chart. So it's on the left. So some people have a lot of planets in the eastern part of the hemisphere. That means that shows us that they are self-motivated, initiating, action-oriented, and very self-assertive. So this is usually strong-willed personalities have a lot of planets on the in the eastern hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere is like on the right half of the chart, houses 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, right? So these people who have a lot of planets in the Western Hemisphere, they tend to be other-oriented and receptive rather than self-motivated. They often consider the needs of the others before they act. So this governs the home, domestic affairs, pleasurable emotions, love affairs, partnerships, and marriage. However, so we also have a northern hemisphere. It is comprised of houses 1 through 6, so the lower half of the chart. These houses rule areas of life that directly impact development of our personalities. So this has often to do with people who are very introverted, who are very private, introspective, and more subjective. The way I would interpret is they have to, in this incarnation, when they have a lot of planets in that lower part of the chart, they have to focus on the inner life, you know.
I'm sorry,
Develop. Yes,
Suzanne.
yes, Ed,
Don't
what's
you
up?
have this backwards?
No, no.
The northern is not above and the southern not below.
No, no, that's in astrology. They're not doing it. I know what you're saying. I know exactly usually, but no, it's southern is at the bottom. Is usually it's you're good. Hold on a second. Yes, you're right. Oh no, wait, hold on a second. Um, okay. I know what you're saying, northern, but we say it that way. But let's not focus on the southern and northern. Let's focus on the houses. It's the houses 1 through 6, so it's the lower half of the chart, and they rule the area of life. And I'm going to look that up because I always focus on the thing, and it might have to do with above and below, but it's comprised. So when they are the lower part of the chart, it's all about working on yourself. If it's the upper part of the chart, it's about people who the outer life is very important. They're usually very sociable, very friendly, and concerned with outside events. But I'm going to check that. Thank you, Ed, for pointing that out.
I just did check, Susanna,
And
and you are correct. Northern Hemisphere is houses
yes,
1 through 6. Yeah.
it's just
So
because of,
it's
it has to do with the somehow above and below. And so you look, I remember but it was such a long time ago when I started that I had the same question. I thought that's weird. Usually we say it the other way around. Okay. So one of the things, and I really feel that in the last decades, much more because there's a revival of astrology, but there is more a focus not on the mundane astrology, but on karmic astrology. And the lunar nodes play, as well as other parts, play a major role when it comes to karmic astrology, right? So just for those who are interested in this, these are the 2 points where the moon's orbital path crosses the ecliptic, the sun's apparent yearly path on the celestial sphere. So I see it as a dance between the two nodes, and I will just tell you why I see it that. So the north node really represents our soul's purpose. It has to do with all the skills that we have to develop. So it represents what our soul must become to fulfill our destiny. It has to do with the purpose and the growth potential. And for us, it is usually an unknown and uncertain territory. So we have to step outside of our comfort zone and face life with a new perspective. The south node has to do with our karma, with our experience that we have brought with us from past lives, with skills we have already learned in past life, with automatic responses because we are familiar with these situations. This is the ancient, right, part of our psyche. It's where we have survival strategies formulated, where our emotional stimuli and automatic reactions can be found. So it's skills that soul knows. So very often when you simplify it, they say, well, this is the skills you have learned that you have brought with you, but your focus has to be the north node, all the skills that you have to develop. And I agree with that, but it is a dance. Because, all these skills that you already have will help you to develop what you have to learn. However, if somebody just falls back always on the south node and doesn't want to learn, then it doesn't become a dance. That's the reason why I call it the dance. This is not a planet. But Chiron is but it's for me, and this is why I added it, because it's very important. It's the place where we have our deepest wounds, and these deepest wounds can have to do with our childhood, but it can also have to do with things that we brought into this life from past incarnations. So Chiron was born. You see, it was born with the wound of being abandoned by his parents, and with the wound of being half God and half human, and also half human and half animal. He became a healer to heal himself and others from this pain. Chiron, as a wounded healer, first must face issues of low self-worth and feelings of inadequacy, and learn to rise above these issues. So everybody who is able to overcome that wound, who is aware of the wound, works on healing that wound, in the end is then able to become a healer in whatever area the wound is located. So the where is very important, and also the sign. It can give you an indication of how to help others, right? So, and as I said, it's like a language where you have all these different parts and you have to put it all together, and it takes so many, many years and so much experience and thousands of charts of interpreting personally, thousands of charts to bring it together and to become, as HPB requests, infallible, right? So one of the most important parts are aspects. And I don't want to go into too much detail. So these are angles that planets form between each other as they move through the zodiac wheel. They describe the flow of energy between the planets. So there can be a conjunction. That means two planets are together, right? And it all depends on the planets, how this plays out. They can be very beneficial, but it can also become a problem. For example, one of the things that I've discovered that I always thought when I started that Sun conjunct Jupiter is a beneficial conjunction, because Jupiter has to do with expansion, right? And, you know, but I have realized that a lot of people with that aspect, they think they're right. They know everything, that everybody else is wrong. So it can also express, this conjunction can also be expressed positively, but unfortunately also negatively. Opposition is when let's, for example, you have a planet in the third house, and then in the another one in the ninth. That's an opposition. That has to always be played out through relationships. Squares imply challenges. Sextile imply opportunities. Trines is help, and if you Theosophists believe that there are lots of invisible helpers. You have to activate them. And inconjunct, that's an aspect that a lot of astrologers don't pay attention to, but the way I describe it is, it's not a crisis, it's not overly challenging, but it's always part of your life. It's like a mosquito in a room, it can bug you. You can ignore it, whatever, but it's there. You have to deal with this on the best way, on a conscious level. So here you have my personal chart, right? And so for those who are new, I'm just going to say, for example, we said the seventh house is the house of partnership, and it's the house of marriage, right? For a house of close partnerships. And my moon is opposite Pluto, and Pluto is a planet that forces you to change, to transform, right? And so that is how, this aspect plays out through relationship, and particularly through relationship in my marriage. There is also there are special, and I didn't want to go into too much detail, but there are special aspects. For example, T squares, and but there's also something that calls a large trine, which I have, and I have actually something called a kite. That means I do have help. That implies that if I am conscious of it, intuit, and work on my intuition, I do help from invisible helpers, right? And we have to activate that. I do have Saturn in the fifth house, and as I said, the fifth house has to do with procreation, recreation, and creation, and with that to do with your first child. So a lot of women with Saturn in the first child, they have either no children, or they have problems conceiving, or they have a child that is that has a lot of problems. So let me just see what the next, I think the next slide is, oh yeah, about transit. So before we go to the transits that I want to talk about a little bit, there's not that much left. Are there any questions, or do you prefer to wait till the end? I'm only going to talk about transits, and then I'm talking about something called synastry. Okay, since nobody says anything, let's go to the end, and then I can stop the share, and then you can ask questions. Yeah, Ed, go ahead.
Yeah. So how do you tie this into theosophy? That's the question I have. This is normal astrology.
Yeah, but at the beginning, I explained that, and it talks about astrology. You see, the way I see it, that, of course, the way I see it is that you have to apply. Everything has to be practical. And as Blavatsky said, it's the oldest science, and that means it's something we should focus on, right? Number one. And I also believe that, and as she explained, it has to do with the solar logos. That is an important aspect in theosophical teachings. She mentions astrology a lot in Isis Unveiled, a little bit less in Secret in the Secret Doctrine, but she talks about it actually in the esoteric instructions, right? And all the connections the between the planets. And she goes into detail with the planets and the colors and the metals. It's like not the horizontal worldview, but the vertical worldview. In Theosophy, we talk about self-knowledge. I mean, the German theosophists that I um, have read all the books and translated some of them from German into English, but he wrote a lot of them in English too. He always talks in all his books about self-knowledge. In this context, self-observation. And so that is why in astrology can help you with your self-knowledge and can help you to improve yourself, help you to increase your awareness. And when you have increased awareness, you can work better. Also, in astrology, you can see, work connected with Jung. Actually, you can work on your shadows, can see what the shadow is and how to integrate your shadow. So as Jennifer and in the description it said, I explained at the beginning how it is connected to theosophy, but then I wanted to show principles. For example, if you believe in reincarnation, which is taught in theosophy, you can see here, this is something I didn't want to mention, but I'm going to mention it as intercepted houses. When you have an intercepted house, one of the signs is not on the cusp of a house. And if you have an intercepted house, the other one is also intercepted. So it shows, intercepted signs show that you, in plain terms, you messed up in your past life. That means whatever you were supposed to learn in a past life, you didn't. And so you have to you have to redo that lesson. Kuswami Kriyananda was I mean, I did karmic astrology before I met Gwen Meyer, who is an astrologer who does a lot of workshops for the Theosophical Society in America. He said that most people need 7 lives to learn a particular lesson really well. And so, in that sense, it also has to do with theosophy. That is my personal opinion. And then theosophy also. Let's look at Saturn, because Saturn is called the Lord of Karma. Saturn is where you have really the challenges in your life. So it helps you to know where are they, and the way I also see it is, we learn in theosophy there's karma, right? There are incarnations, there's suffering. And so the way I look at it is like, okay, if you understand that these are the things that you have to learn in this life, you change your perspective. You don't, you say, okay, I suffer. Maybe you suffer, maybe it helps you with the suffering, but you say, instead of I am suffering, what I am learning from this lesson. And that's how I would say that helps me from a theosophical point of view. And every time I have a client and I work with them on their chart, a few times or maybe a few years, it all depends on the person, then the information, then all my approach is always from a theosophical point of view, and every one of my clients knows that. So I will integrate the theosophical teachings from that. Does that help? So
Yeah, I think that helped. One
yeah,
other question.
yeah.
Do you have any opinion of Vedic astrology versus Western astrology?
No, I don't. But it's like One time somebody asked me why you are in the ULT, not in the ULT, but in the, Theosophical Society of America. And I would answer because that's how I was introduced to Theosophy. That's where I met the first Theosophists. So the way I feel is that is what I was meant to be. I learned Theosophy, I mean astrology from Switzerland, right? Everything I learned was in German, and it was a 2 year course. It was monthly lessons and things like that. And so that was the first one, except that I really wanted to go deeper and I wanted to go into karmic astrology because that's my interest, mainly because of probably because of Theosophy. But I would say that you probably can find the same or similar information in Vedic astrology. I don't know that much of a difference, but I I still want to improve all the things I know that I have learned so far before I want to go into Vedic astrology. But maybe in the next life, I will be born in a country where Vedic astrology is more popular. But I wouldn't mind getting maybe an interpretation one day. But I'm pretty sure that Vedic astrology, and again, Ed, it all depends on the astrologer. I'm sure they're outstanding Vedic astrologer, and if I ever encounter one, I will have an interpretation. But I'm sure that that there are many things that are overlapping, and maybe the approaches are a little bit different. Things like that. Yeah. So, but I really don't know. I have read about Vedic astrology. I think years ago I had my, because you can get the charts for free. But, I don't think there was anything different than what
Well, the signs could be very different because it's using the actual signs as they are in the sky, as opposed to the seasons.
yeah.
So your planets will be in sometimes in different signs, and they don't emphasize the signs so much. Yeah, the other question I have is, is one more esoteric and one more exoteric? But since you don't know too much about it, just skip it.
No, I mean, it might be more esoteric, but that's why I like to focus on the karmic astrology. And for that, you really have to focus on the Saturn, you have to focus on the nodes, you also focus on the Chiron. And I know that, for example, Gwen Meyer, who has been, not Gwendolyn, Gwen Meyer, who has been doing astrology for 50 years and also has a PhD from Jungian psychology. She can sometimes even see, how advanced somebody is, which rays, like I have a program, it tells you which rays are emphasized in somebody's personality. But again, the focus is, in my opinion, on the personality. So these generic interpretations are very often focused on mundane astrology. There are some karmic astrologers and some karmic astrology programs too. But yeah. So I focus on the Western. I will tell you, just because I have worked with my chart for such a long time and I know what it says and I'm working on the shadows and other things, that is for me. Um, uh, so I wouldn't know much, but I'll look into that question. Now you made me curious. So I want to show something. So transits. So astrologers watch these movements closer to see how they might impact our lives. And any of you who are interested in a little bit of astrology, have not been studying it, you might have heard when there are lots of movements. And what's going on is, like, you see Pluto. So when it comes to transits, we focus more on the newer planets and on Saturn. So we focus on Pluto, on Neptune, and on Uranus, right? So And Pluto moves very, as I said, I didn't want to share all the information because that would be too long. But the moon moves quickly, like it takes 30, 31 days to go around the zodiac. The sun, 365 days. Now, all these newer planets, they all take a long time to go around the zodiac, right? For example, Pluto. Pluto was in Capricorn for a long time, and it will be now, and I don't have it now in my head, but I think it's 14 to 16 years in Aquarius. So it was in Aquarius twice, went back to Capricorn because it was retrograde. Now it enters Aquarius. That means a new phase is starting. Things will be changing. But why these changes are even more important, and I'm not only talking about our own personal life, I'm talking about what's going on in the world. We have Saturn and Neptune. They are going to move from Pisces into Aries very soon. So you have two of these signs who are slower moving going into another sign. And then you have Uranus. Uranus is right now still in Taurus, but it's going to move into Gemini soon. So you have these four planets who are going to move into a new sign. So there are going to be changes. But for example, when you have Pluto, as I said, Pluto is a transit that forces you to change, forces you to let go of everything that's not needed anymore, right? And then we said that the sixth house is the house of work, of habits, of health. When Pluto is now going into my seventh house, so the next 14 years, relationships will be a little bit more focused. Like a lot of things, it's not only one thing. But it was in my sixth house. I retired from the university while Pluto was in the sixth house in Capricorn. I had several health issues that I had to deal with when Pluto was in the sixth house. So nothing big, but that's one of the things that are really helpful. There's things called Saturn returns, like Saturn between the age of 28 and 30, you have your first Saturn return. Between the age of 57 and 60, you have your second Saturn return. And the first Saturn return, basically, if you haven't grown up and have become responsible, it's going to be challenging. That's what the Saturn. And when you have the second Saturn return, look back. What happened in my life between the age of 27 or 30? What was going on? And it will, and the similar issues will happen then again. So these are very often challenging times. If you have kids in that age, or look back at your own life, what happened? So that can be very interesting. And then I wanted to add something. There's something called the synastry chart. And the synastry chart is when you have a bi-wheel between your personal chart and the chart of another person to see to look at for me, it's always to look, is there any karmic relationship? And just recently, and I thought, okay, I'm going to include that because it made so much sense to me. Jeffrey Hudson is a theosophist I really like, and he this is from the book called Man's Supersensory and Spiritual Powers, Love Relationships Ruled by Law. Again, theosophy here, Ed. So let me read this. Because it makes so much sense to me. Why then does love sometimes endure and sometimes fade? Because these successive lives of man are lived under the operation of the law of cause and effect, or compensation. Every action produces its appropriate reaction. Every experience is the product of preceding activity. Happiness and fulfillment in any human endeavor are largely due to the sincerity, the continuity, the fidelity, and the general success of preceding endeavors in similar or same directions. Fidelity in love wins fidelity, just as infidelity brings infidelity. He also says, indeed, all human experience is governed by exact law. Nowhere is there the element of luck or chance. Absolute justice rules this world and is ensured to every human being by the action of the compensatory law. St. Paul gave this truth to the world in his words, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And he says, the problem of success or failure in love and marriage is thus solved. Both are the results of conduct in this and preceding lives. The decision is not in any way final, however. By right knowledge, right motive, and right conduct in this present life, undesirable tendencies from the past may be modified and neutralized. By wrong attitude and conduct, the most favorable auspices may be nullified. From this it will be seen that marriage can be one of the finest evolutionary aids to the fulfillment of man's pilgrimage to perfection, which is the supreme purpose of his existence. Love, marriage, and parenthood are educative experiences of greatest possible value to the pilgrim God, which is the spiritual soul of man. This touched me deeply, and there is the connection to that was the connection for me to Theosophy, right? Because we know some people, they don't have a partner. Some people are married and the marriage is successful, and or they have more than one marriage, or they have a long-time marriage, like my husband and I. But in karmic astrology, synastry charts are used to identify past life connections, unresolved issues, and lessons to be learned in a current relationship. By comparing two individuals' birth charts and looking at the positions of planets, aspects like conjunction and oppositions, and house placements, especially the 12th house and lunar nodes, astrologers can reveal the nature of a karmic bond, which can be intense and all-consuming, offering a profound opportunity for growth and healing. So, as I said, this is the North Node, and so the way you do it, and you know, you can work for hours on synastry charts too, but what you do is you put one person on the inner wheel and one person on the outer wheel, and then you switch it around. And you first look at the individual chart. You look first at the 7th house and how capable, how that relationship can be. For example, I have moon in Aquarius. That means I have to have a partner that respects me. I'm a little bit detached from emotionally because it's an air sign. I need my own space. I need to be able to have my freedom in certain ways, you know, things like that. So here you can see, and there's only 2 degrees reference, the 7th house. And so on the inner wheel is now my husband, and I'm on the outer wheel. So his Saturn is in the 7th house, and that can usually say, you know, your love is your worst enemy. But anyhow, joke by side. My North Node is here. So you can see this is a karmic relationship. There is no doubt about it. And then the South Node, his sun is aligned with my south node. So that even says more that we have been together. This is not our first marriage, but because Saturn is involved, there is a seriousness to our relationship. We have to overcome problems, and because my Saturn is in the fifth house, it has to do with children. So the Saturn could be in the eighth house or in the second house, then it might have to do with finances or with inheritance or the position, the placement always tells you where the problems are. And with that, I'm going to stop the share. And that's why, Ed, from a theosophical point of view, it can help tremendously to work with somebody and know the astrological chart. I also believe in the future that all therapists and psychiatrists, that they will do, and that might be hundreds and hundreds of years away, but they will work with the charts because the chart will give them so much information. Of course, each placement, you can see that with twins, can play out differently. So when you have a client, you have to ask questions and then you get the information.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, and since Susanna said you have to be teaching a yoga class soon, I just want on behalf of the group to say thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights with us. Astrology is an endlessly fascinating subject, and one that warrants lifetimes worth of study to truly integrate it as a practice. And for you to have taken the time to give us not just the insights into the science, but also the esoteric underpinnings is of great value. And for anyone who hasn't already had a chart done, I would strongly encourage you to do that because it's never too late to gain those insights. So thank you again so very much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the questions.
You're
And
welcome.
Awesome.
wonderful
Beautiful. Thank
rest
you.
of the day.
You
Bye-bye.
too.